Hello everyone, welcome to the Connecting the World show, and I'm your host Monim Rizvi. Today we have a guest, and her name is Peta Jones. What she do? Where is exactly from? Where is she? Without any wasting of time, I'm going to invite my guest. But without before inviting my guest, I'm going to introduce herself in a short introduction, a brief introduction. She is a teacher, she is an activist, and she is working to praying together in Jerusalem. So, without any wasting of time, I am going to invite Miss Peta Jones Pellach. Hello, how are you?
Hello, nice to be here.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you too, and welcome to the Connecting the World show.
Thank you.
Okay, Peter, first of all, I would love to know more about you. Who are you? Where are you from? And what you exactly do in your life?
Okay, well, some of your listeners may pick up on my accent, which is Australian, but Australian with British parents, so a bit of both. I was born in Australia, I grew up in Australia, and I married Israeli. And after a number of years, we lived here for a couple of years when our children were small, and our children began moving back to Israel, and we followed them. But of course, it was our intention always to return to Israel. We chose to live in Jerusalem, which is different from the rest of the country. Our children are scattered more. And so, Australian born, living in Jerusalem, and very happy to be here.
That's great. Okay, now kindly now tell us about your education background, what you exactly studied, and where from you studied, and what was your major subject.
Okay, well, I might start with high school because one thing that was interesting to me is I went to a public high school in Australia, and my friends were as diverse as the continents of the world and the countries in the world. We were all from different places, and one of the things that was interesting is I was the one of only a couple of Jewish children in my school, and my friends were all religious but from different religions. And one of the things that bound us together as friends in the school was that although we came from different faiths, we were the religious children from different backgrounds. The school I went to was also unusual in my days. I'm older than you may guess. And in my days, most of the schooling in Australia was separate girls and boys high schools, but our school was co-ed. And what it meant is it was quite an experimental school. And what that meant is that I took a lot of time not going to school and just enjoying life. But I was very fortunate to be able to go to university. And my undergraduate degree, I started studying law. I discovered very quickly that I didn't like law. I had all these idealistic beliefs that studying law would teach me how to be just and fair, and studying law, as many of your listeners will know, is not all about justice and those good values. So I decided to take my BA and run, meaning I'd started studying the law subjects, and I had majored in history in my undergraduate. But I was very fortunate due to almost a chance encounter, partly because I was a political activist at university. I didn't get, I wasn't so engaged by the studies, so it gave me an opportunity for political activity. And Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg, who was one of the prominent Jewish historians of the 20th century, visited Australia, met me, and invited me to study at Columbia University in New York. And I did my master's at Columbia University in the School of International Affairs, and I focused on the Middle East, and so studied, if you like, primarily Arab-Israel conflict, Middle East. I met my Israeli husband there in New York, so the joke always was that I went to study international affairs, and I had one. We returned to Australia, where I worked primarily in Jewish education for both the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community, teaching about what it was, what Judaism was. The Jewish community in Australia is primarily a post-Holocaust, post-Shoah community, meaning that most of my generation's parents were Holocaust survivors, which meant that they didn't have a Jewish education. Most of our children, the next generation, went to Jewish day schools. It was our generation that missed out on a Jewish education. But I was very fortunate. My parents were not Holocaust survivors directly. My father had been in London, England during the war. He came from a religious family. He had a good background. So I had more Jewish education than most of my peers. And because of that, I was able to become involved and engaged. The reason I didn't follow up on my studies in international affairs was by the time I returned to Australia from New York, I already had one child and the second came not long afterwards. So being a mother, I decided education was an easier role to take, but it was also a very challenging and fulfilling role. I did teach at university. I taught, some of you will have known Martin Indyk, who was American ambassador to Israel a few years ago, but he's also originally Australian. And he was teaching at the university, and when I returned, and he asked me to teach for him when he took his sabbatical year. And that became I had a number of university appointments, but primarily I was engaged in adult education after teaching in schools, in adult and community education, Jews and non-Jews, about Judaism. And that led me into the world of interfaith dialogue. And on a number of occasions and in major dialogues, I represented the community in dialogue, first with the Uniting Church, then with the Catholic bishops. And I always laughed because as a woman, the Catholic Bishops' Conference had always been men with men. And when I joined the communal dialogue representing the Jewish community, we forced the Catholics to allow women into their dialogue team too. So I feel like I caused a breakthrough for women in dialogue. And then I was a founding member of the Australian National Dialogue of Christians, Muslims and Jews. And from there, I was invited by the Australian government twice to represent Australia in international interfaith dialogues. The first was in Indonesia and the second was in the Philippines. So I got a broad international spectrum of dialogue. While continuing my work as a teacher, I was deeply involved in interfaith, interreligious dialogue while still living in Australia. And when I came to live here, I was very fortunate that the Elijah Interfaith Institute was looking for an education director. And it was just, those of us who believe in the divine plan, or some will say it was just good luck. But whatever it was, when I arrived in Israel, Elijah Interfaith needed my skills, and it's been a good match. So I've been able to continue teaching here as well, but working in the world of interfaith dialogue.
That's great, and you tell us your story in detail. It's so wonderful, that how you participated in different kind of activities and different kind of situation. And you are also the director of education for Elijah Interfaith. How you joined this community or this society or this organization? And what was the story behind that? And what's exactly your job there? As you are a director, but what you have to do?
Okay, well, Parliament of World Religions is a major interfaith event. One time it was every 5 years. They're now, the last few years, they've been meeting more frequently. In 2009, the meeting took place in Melbourne, Australia. And it was the end of 2009, and I had already made all the arrangements to come in to Israel at the beginning of 2010. So the Jewish community, as a sort of gift for my work in interfaith relations, supported my attendance. I represented the community at the Parliament of World Religions, and it was like a farewell gift, if you like, from the Jewish community to allow me to attend. At that meeting, I met Rabbi Dr. Alon Goshen-Gottstein, who's the founder and director of the Elijah Interfaith Institute. And when I arrived in Israel, his secretary contacted me and suggested that I apply for the position. So it was one of those things that the timing was just perfect. So we have experimented with my role. One of the things about being a member of an interfaith organization is, by very definition, these organizations are not large and not particularly hierarchical or structured. So my position has changed according to my skills and interests. One of the things that I have been particularly keen on is re-establishing the Elijah Summer School, which takes place in Jerusalem, usually in the summer here. This year, it took place over Zoom, but our idea is to bring students of theology from around the world, from different religions, together in Jerusalem to have a shared learning experience around a theme that is connected with theology. And I was able to re-establish the summer school, which had been in abeyance since the 2000 Intifada. It had been very difficult to organize interfaith events in Jerusalem. And in 2010, when I joined Elijah, I said, this is one of my goals. And now, thank God, it's a very strong and important part of our work. Elijah publishes a lot of publications, and I'm deeply involved in the editing process of our academic work. I've also been involved in helping to organize the meetings that take place every 2 years of the Elijah Board of World Religious Leaders. We have 6 or 7 world religions represented at our meetings, and they're genuinely world religious leaders from around the world. They are hosted by different members of the Elijah Board, so in different parts of the world. And they're different from other interfaith meetings in that these are religious leaders. We don't get them together to go on a stage and make big statements. We get them together to discuss deep theological issues. And so in preparation for the meetings, we prepare serious studies through our Elijah Academy of Scholars on interfaith or different perspectives on a topic that we're going to discuss. And so there's a lot of work involved in preparing what the scholars are going to discuss, and then what the leaders are going to discuss. So I've been involved in those meetings. And the final thing that I've had a very active role in, I do a lot of jobs, odd jobs, everybody does in their work, you know, what has to be done is done. But the other major thing I've been involved in is I'm a co-founder representing Elijah in Praying Together in Jerusalem. And this has an interesting history in that there was an event held at the Christian Institute, which is called the Tantur Ecumenical Institute in Jerusalem, that brought together many, many interfaith organizations. There are dozens of interfaith organizations in this country. They all do different things. And Elijah's prime focus is academic and theological, but some of them are more social. Some of them only have 3 religions. We have 6, 7 religions. So we're all different. But I was representing Elijah at this big conference called Envisioning Our Future. And as part of the conference, we had what we call an open space exercise, which is an opportunity for people to throw out their visions, their thoughts, their projects that they would like to see. And I found myself standing next to at that time, the new rector of Tantur, Father Russ McDougall, who's currently, unfortunately, had to return to the States, but he was the rector of Tantur, and a German Christian pilgrim. And the 3 of us found ourselves together with the idea that we should pray side by side in Jerusalem. We are all people of faith. This is a interreligious organization. We believe in prayer. We don't just pray for show, or we don't just pray because it's an obligation. We pray because we believe in prayer. We believe that prayer has force and power. And this is something that can be hard to explain to people who aren't religious, but we really believe that when you pray, you're doing something. And we said we have to pray side by side, not try and look for some strange mishmash of the different prayers and different traditions, but rather each pray our own authentic prayer, but side by side. And of course, the German pilgrim returned to Germany, but Father Russ and I took on other partners very quickly because there was some enthusiasm for this idea, and began planning. The event had taken place in June, and we planned to have our first gathering in October after the summer and after the Jewish High Holy season. And in between that time, there was also another meeting of Parliament of World Religions at Salt Lake City. And we thought we'd also publicize and talk about praying together there, so that we were building up some momentum. And sadly, terribly, that summer, there were a number of very horrible stabbings. It was the summer of stabbings in Jerusalem. And Russ and I talked, and we said, is anybody going to come to pray together in this very violent and unpleasant atmosphere? Well, we were absolutely thrilled. Lots and lots of Christians came. A good number of Jews came. One Muslim came. And we were very pleased to have one Muslim, but we said, why aren't there more? And we spoke to our partners, because many of the organizations we were working with had plenty of Muslim members, but they didn't come to this event. And we said, why not? And they explained, we arranged to meet at the Jaffa Gate. And the Jaffa Gate is a place where Christians, Muslims, and Jews all the time pass through, all the time. It's a very multi-religious, multicultural venue. But they explained to us, some of them, that a few months before, there had been an interfaith gathering sponsored by the Abrahamic reunion of a big hug of the wall. And the Muslim activists had been attacked by what they call anti-normalization, people who are against dialogue. And they didn't want to meet in a public place where they could be victims of those opposed to dialogue. So we changed our approach, and we started meeting at Jaffa Gate for those who wanted to meet there, but we would pray somewhere else, and we would give the address to people who wanted to come of where we were actually going to pray. And it brought in some of our Muslim partners as well. We have met, originally it was the last Thursday of the month. Recently we swapped to the first Thursday of the month. We have met every month without a break for 5 years now. And we, in the last few months, because of coronavirus, we have met over Zoom, but we continue to meet and pray side by side. And although some months we've met in terrible weather, we've met in the rain and the snow and the cold, and we've met in the sun and the heat, we just keep meeting. There's a core group who never let us down on Zoom or in person. And then there's other people who join us when they can. Sadly, due to the absence of tourists and groups now, we don't have any groups that can just join us when they're visiting, but that will resume that. We've always met. We've always prayed side by side. We do some learning together as well. So we have a Jewish, a Christian, and a Muslim teacher teaching on the same topic as well. Before we pray separately our own evening prayers, and then we come together to pray together, sing together, and have a silent circle together. It's a very powerful experience. And it's part of Elijah's vision. We have a vision at the Elijah Interfaith that one day we will be able to build what we call the Center of Hope. Hope stands for House of Prayer and Education. Because currently in Jerusalem, there is not one institution which is truly interfaith. We have lots of wonderful institutions like the Swedish Theological Seminary, I mentioned before Tantor, lots of places where they welcome interfaith activity. But there's always a host and a guest. And as some of you will understand, that brings a political imbalance. So we are looking to create a place where everybody is the host, that truly belongs equally to all the faiths. And that's our vision. But until we have such a physical place, the praying together and the learning together represents what might happen in a physical place. And it's very powerful. We're not a large movement yet. We don't want to publicize and have thousands of people, because there's something about the intimacy that means that those who come really want to pray. Nobody's on show. Nobody's trying to tell anyone else what to do. It's a genuine movement, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah, that means a lot for you. And you tell one thing more, that you have created, like you people have created the place where everyone is a guest and everyone is a
Yes.
host.
The Hope Center.
So how, yeah, and how you all manage that
Well,
environment, as everyone
it's a
is host
vision.
and everyone is a guest?
The most important thing about that vision is that when we come together, we need to come together with a feeling that everybody's voice has equal weight, that nobody is the dominant. Let me maybe focus on something that is a big issue in Israel. I speak English as my first language. So obviously for me, speaking English isn't a problem. One of the big problems we have in this country is language. We have the Jewish population, which speaks Hebrew as its uniting language. Although there are many immigrants for whom Hebrew is not the first language. We have a very, very large Russian population. We have a large English-speaking population. We have a very large French population. A lot of Jews have left France in recent years due to anti-Semitism. We have an Amharic-speaking population from the Ethiopian Jews. So language, even amongst the Jewish community, is a problem because not everybody is fluent in Hebrew. But how much more so, 20% of the population speak Arabic as their first language. And many of those who are Arabic speakers don't speak Hebrew. This is one of the sad things that has been lost in recent years. Very few Jews learn Arabic, and almost only a small percentage of the Arab population learns Hebrew. So how do you communicate? And one of the things about praying together is we decided that the language of the group would be English as an equalizer. But it doesn't always work, because it becomes, if you like, a question of privilege. Those who've been privileged enough to learn in an environment where they've learned English, and that's whether you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim, you know, you have to be privileged to have English as your English good enough. So we struggle with language as a topic here. So in the Center of Hope, you know, again, our vision is that there will always be an opportunity to share in your language, you know, the ability to have translators and interpreters available to you all the time. But language is not just language. There are cultural languages as well. The foods you like, the way you dress, you know, there's so many things about how do you, and this is what we're looking for. How do you make people feel that this is their place too, and that their culture, their language, their method of praying? Because again, one of the principles of Elijah is that all world religions ultimately are seeking the same values, the same goodness, the same connection with that which is beyond us, the divine for most of us, and something beyond. You know, religions, we have some commonality, but we are using sometimes different languages or different ways to reach that ideal. And we want to create an atmosphere by which all the languages are legitimate, all the ways of reaching the divine are legitimate, and it's something we're struggling towards.
That's great. Thank you so much, Miss Peta Jones, and you gave your precious time to my show. It was such a pleasure to talk with you and talk regarding that topic. You are doing a fantastic job, and you are providing the platform where all people can came from different kind of religion, different kind of world, and they can spend a time together, and they whatever they have some myths in their mind or something in their heart should be clear by making a space like that. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. Now we have to.
And I just have to say one more thing. One more thing.
Yeah, sure.
A priority for me is also women, and making sure that women are properly represented in religious life and prayer life and interfaith and dialogue. And it's very sad when women are unrepresented or underrepresented in all forms of dialogue and decision making. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that, because it's another one of my personal agendas that I'm pushing into a larger interfaith than the other organizations. That's
great. Thank you so much for your wonderful time. We have to end our session here, and it was such a fantastic to talk with you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.